In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set up and configure Apple Business Essentials. Now, if you already know what an MDM is, you may want to skip ahead a little bit as I'm going to explain what ABE is and how we can use it and really where it fits in a particular business environment. Now, before we get going, if you need help configuring Apple Business Essentials or really any sort of device management solution, we can help you. We're a full-service IT company and device management is one of our specialties. So if that's something that interests you, head on over to our website. It's unifiedit.tech. We'd love to connect and see if we can help you out. So what is Apple Business Essentials? Well, ABE is essentially a light MDM. Now, MDM just means mobile device management. It's a tool for managing devices that are, you guessed it, mobile. You can actually manage all kinds of devices with MDMs. Phones, tablets, computers, servers, pretty much anything that has an operating system. Now, in Apple's case, their device management system, which we'll be calling ABE for short, for Apple Business Essentials, can only manage Apple devices. So Macs, iPhones, iPads, Apple TVs, and I don't think they have support for watches quite yet, but the main devices that you're going to use in a business environment. So why use an MDM? Well, if you have one or two devices, to be honest, it's really not worth the hassle of setting up a system like this. But if you're a growing business and maybe you bought one Mac or two, and now you have 5, 6, 7, 10 Macs, and you have a number of employees, and you change the Wi-Fi password and you find that you have to run around to each one of these devices, or you want to give them a certain particular set of apps that is the standard for your environment. Well, if you're finding that it's starting to bother you, this is where an MDM can come in. And a light MDM like Apple Business Essentials is great if you're a business owner who has some tech savviness skills, but maybe you're not an IT professional. If you're an IT professional and you're managing a larger environment, you should look elsewhere, in my opinion. Check out Mosyle, check out JumpCloud. Intune is another good option. These are more fully featured MDMs, but Apple Business Essentials has its place, and that place is for the owner-operator of a business that has between, we'll say, 5 to 25 devices. And if that's you, then this video is absolutely for you. And we're going to show you everything from how to create your account all the way through to actually how to enroll devices and manage them. And before we get into that, I want to talk about device enrollment. Now, there are two ways that you can enroll a device in Apple Business Essentials. The first way is open enrollment, and that's what we're going to do here today. I'm actually going to enroll this MacBook Pro into ABE and show you what that looks like. The second way that we can enroll devices is through the DEP program. DEP stands for the Device Enrollment Program. And this is a program where we purchase devices through Apple or through authorized resellers. That device's serial number will automatically get put into Apple's system such that when the end user, maybe it's an employee in another state or just in your office, opens that computer and that computer reaches out to Apple for activation, it's going to say, hey, this device is registered to this organization, so you need to go here to get information on setup. And so as soon as that end user connects to Wi-Fi, it is automatically enrolled into whatever settings that you have. Now, I don't actually have a Mac or an iPhone with DEP setup, so I can't show you that in this video, but we are going to cover open enrollment. Now, DEP is better, and if you don't already, you really should have a store with Apple in their business store. You get some discounts, and there's other perks such as that. You can phone a local Apple team. It's a business team. It's a dedicated team. You should absolutely do that. But in this tutorial, we're going to show you how to do open enrollment, because regardless of when you begin that, you probably have devices that are already set up and need to be enrolled. Now, let's get into the actual interface. After you sign up for ABE, we want to head on over to business.apple.com and sign in. Now, unlike most MDMs, we can pretty much get going right away. And the first thing we're going to do is create a user account. I'm actually going to create a user account for myself, and I actually recommend having a separate, lower permissioned account that you use for your device, even if you are an administrator in the organization. And that's just general best practice. Now, by default, Apple will automatically generate a handle for your managed Apple ID, but if you want to add a couple TXT records to your domain registrar, you can actually get your custom domain name in here for the managed Apple ID. And this is an important thing I want to point out here. This will create a managed Apple ID. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, essentially it's an iCloud account that has a couple features disabled, primarily email. This is not an email that we are creating. It is simply an Apple ID. And so you still want to use a service such as Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 in conjunction with ABE in order to get email. And you may want to continue to use that services for things like Calendar, Contacts, and Drive. You will get access to those features in iCloud here, but you may find it better to use your existing suite of tools for those things. Now, interestingly enough, Apple does have custom email support on iCloud, just not for the business side of things, but I would not be surprised at all if we see that as an addition in the future. Now we need to also define permissions here. You can actually change what these permissions do in the settings of ABE, but for now I'm just going to choose staff. Now this is the manual process for adding users, but you can actually go into the settings for your ABE instance and syndicate this with either Microsoft 365 through Azure or Google Workspace. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you have some technical expertise, as it adds a lot of unnecessary complexity, especially if you're a smaller organization. Now that we've got this account created, the next step is to add a license, which Apple calls subscriptions. So we're going to head on over to subscriptions, and then we're going to go ahead and purchase a subscription for myself. Now there are two general categories. The first is employee plan and device plan. You want to use employee plans for probably most of these accounts, and the reason for that is this is going to be for individuals. Device plans would be great for something like a point of sale system, maybe a check-in iPad, something like that. So in this case, I'm going to choose employee plan, and I'm actually going to do up to 3 devices since I'm going to be connecting my iPhone and iPad to this system. And I always start off with the least amount of iCloud storage that I need, and then I can add more if needed. And you can also purchase AppleCare Plus for business, which is pretty cool. Now, if you look at the price point here, first of all, Apple is very generous with the free trials. And then this is going to be, what, $7 a month? This is a really good price when you consider you're getting not just an MDM solution, which I've seen MDM pricing that's more than that, but we're also getting iCloud with 200 gigs of storage. So we're going to go ahead and add that plan, and then I need to assign this to a user. And then we'll go ahead and add that plan. Now I want to point out I'm doing all of these steps for one user right now. And I would recommend doing that for your first user, which is probably going to be your own laptop or MacBook, or well, that's the same thing. Probably going to be for your own user that you're going to be doing this. Now, once you get comfortable with ABE, I would advise kind of doing these all together. So create all your user accounts, purchase the licenses in volume, and then you can onboard in volume as well. But that's just a recommendation. Now, if we head back over to my user, we're going to need to click refresh because we're going to see some new features be made available to my user account. Sweet. Now if we click into here, we have the option to enroll this device. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and we see we have 2 options here. We can either enroll a personal iPhone or an iPad, or we can enroll a company-owned Mac. Currently there is no support for the option to enroll a personal Mac or a company-owned mobile device that would be tied to the organization. And so these are actually kind of 2 different standards. If you've worked with other MDMs, we would kind of consider this a BYOD option, and this would be for company-owned. Really important that we don't use this second option here in the bottom for anything that is a personal device. This MDM gives us way too much access for what we would expect for a personal device. This is not a BYOD protocol. Now if we go ahead and click this option, we can either send those instructions via email, which is awesome if you're onboarding either a remote employee, maybe who already has a Mac but they aren't in this MDM, or if they're just maybe working from home. In my case, since I'm actually going to enroll this machine, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the link right there, and I'm going to go and paste it in a new browser tab. And as you can see, it just downloaded a file, actually a configuration file, to my Mac. Now a couple things before we enroll into MDM. We actually want to go ahead and open up system settings, and we're going to check 2 things. First, I want to make sure that I am signed out of iCloud. The Manage Apple ID we created earlier is going to become the primary iCloud account for this machine. You can still add your personal iCloud account, although there is some disadvantages to this, unfortunately. And so you'll see that a little bit later. But the Managed Apple ID we created will become the primary Apple ID for this device. The second thing we want to go ahead and do, and I haven't found anything in documentation on this, but it just seems to be an issue, is you want to go into privacy and security and make sure that FileVault is disabled. Now, the reason for this is probably because Apple Business Essentials has the ability to create FileVault keys and escrow them, and so that probably is a conflict. In general, I absolutely recommend keeping FileVault turned on. It's a really good security feature, and there's really no good reason to have it off. But if you are enrolling an existing Mac like I am, go ahead and turn that off. And for those of you wondering, I found that being an issue because I actually use it. So now that we have downloaded the configuration profile, we're just going to go ahead and click on that, and it's going to prompt us in the upper right-hand corner. And then where did that do? Well, it didn't do anything. Actually, it primed or kind of loaded the configuration profile. I'm just going to search for profiles here. And you can see that profile is right here. And I'm going to go ahead and see this is a valid configuration profile. And I'm going to click install. It should prompt me to log in with the Apple ID, which it just did. That is going to be the email address. Well, actually, I want to point this out here. The email address you sent this to could be different than the managed Apple ID. So you want to make sure that you're using this when it asks you for the managed Apple ID. Well, don't use my email, use your email. But not your email, your managed Apple ID rather. Now it's asking us for a password. You're probably wondering, where is this password? Well, that password was sent to my email. We can also go ahead and prompt it again by clicking the Create Sign-In button, and we can actually download the temporary password or send it via email. I'm just going to go ahead and download it. And again, you can do all of these tasks in mass if you want to. So now I can go ahead and click download, and let's do it in a PDF, why not? Sweet. So now I've gotten that PDF, and here is my temporary password. And I'm going to be prompted to change this to a more secure password. I'm also going to be asked to enable two-factor authentication. I'm going to go ahead and paste in my old password, and then I'm going to type in my new password. Now I'm being prompted for my computer password. Awesome, we have successfully enrolled this machine in MDM. You can see our configuration profile right there. It actually tells us right above there that this Mac is now being supervised by Unified IT. Now I want to point something out here, and that's that with 2 clicks, we can actually remove this machine from MDM. To avoid this, I recommend creating a separate local admin account on this machine. You can call it IT or local admin, and then demoting the standard user account, which in this case is the only account on this machine, to be a standard user. And the reason for this is not only to prevent an end user from doing this. In most cases, we probably trust our end users. It's really to prevent malware, or in the case of this device being stolen, anyone else from removing the device from MDM and then preventing us from being able to administer it or track it remotely. Now that we've installed our configuration profile, I actually want to back out of here and show you the Apple ID. As you can see, this is the Apple ID, or rather the managed Apple ID that we created earlier with the business email right there. At the very bottom, we can see other devices that will be signed into this Apple ID. In this case, it's simply my MacBook. But if we click into iCloud, things look a little sparse here. Future coder here, I just wanted to point out that within a couple hours, those other iCloud services will load in, and we can see all of them right here. There's still no iCloud Mail, but this is expected as that's not a feature of ABE. One of the cool features, though, is we go into iCloud Drive, we can enable syncing of our desktop and documents folder across our managed Apple ID. Let's head back to ABE and start configuring. So if we head back on over here, we notice a couple of differences with my user. First of all, we can see I have a MacBook Pro, and the enroll, or the create sign-in button rather, has been changed to reset password. Now if we head on over to the devices tab, we have this kind of caution symbol right here, and the reason for that is that on this MacBook Pro we don't have FileVault enabled or the Firewall enabled. On the Firewall, frankly, you really don't need to have that enabled, but I would strongly recommend and almost consider it mandatory to have FileVault enabled, particularly on mobile devices such as MacBooks. And you can actually do that right in ABE. The nice thing about this is that ABE will escrow your FileVault encryption keys, so you don't have to keep track of a bunch of different keys for each individual machine. Now, this is a very easy process, although there are several steps, so I will have a separate video walking you through that. For now, you can check out Apple's guide on how to do it in the description of our video right now. So let's head on over to settings. Now in other MDMs we would call these configuration profiles, and let's configure our first setting. Now what Apple has under the recommended section right here I think are great. These are all options that I would do for pretty much any organization, but if you go on over to all settings, you can see that they have a few options in here. Not as many options as we would see in a more fully featured MDM such as Mosyle or Jamf, but I will say this list has been growing, and that is encouraging to see. So let's go ahead and do a couple in this video. We're going to do Wi-Fi and software update, as well as the application layer firewall, just to show you what that looks like. Now, let's go and start with the application layer firewall. And I'm just going to call this Firewall. And you can see right at the top here which platforms this is supported on. Not all settings are supported on all platforms, and this one in particular is only going to work on macOS. Now, we don't have a whole lot of options here, and you can see we can basically turn this off or on and then allow the user to manually override it. And we have this big word right here, automatically. You're going to see this a lot in ABE, and it's why professionals such as myself typically don't use this in environments that we are managing. But if you don't want to have to manage, an intrusion prevention system and update things, it's a great solution that can just work. And so we're going to turn that on, and then we will enable the firewall. But we will not block all incoming communications, nor would I recommend enabling stealth mode unless you know what that is. Basically, it can block a lot of things like pings and whatnot, but there's really no point in enabling unless you have a good reason to do so. So we're going to go ahead and add this setting. And let's add another one. Let's do Wi-Fi. Where's Wi-Fi? Here's Wi-Fi. You can see this profile is going to apply to, can work on all three of these devices, but if for whatever reason you wanted your TV, Apple TV devices, or your iOS devices to connect to a separate network, you could simply deselect this. And even if this is applied to something, to a person or a user group that has those devices, it won't apply to those devices. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this the Unified IT Network. I'm going to give it an SSID. This is going to be a pre-shared key. This is essentially WPA2 or WPA3. And we're going to give it our password. And this network is hidden, so we're going to choose Hidden Network. And yes, we do want it to auto-join. Awesome. Let's do one more. Let's do Software Update. This is a good one to have. Now, there are mixed opinions on whether we should automatically update devices. Here's my rule of thumb. If you know that you're going to be diligent about downloading and updating important patches to your devices, particularly important security patches, then you don't need to force auto update. I would just recommend having this feature automatically download all the updates, and then the end user can install them whenever they're available to do so. However, if you know you're just not a good sysadmin when it comes to making sure that important updates go out, then it's okay to enable automatic updates. Every once in a while, sure, you may have a bad update. That doesn't happen as much as people think it does, but it does happen a lot more frequently that devices which have patches to known security vulnerabilities get overlooked, and so they can become compromised. But in this case, I'm going to automatically download all the updates, but I'm not going to automatically install all the updates. And I'm just going to call this my macOS update policy. Now that we've configured 3 settings, let's go ahead and add some apps. To do that, we're going to head over to the Apps tab. And then right here, you can see I've already purchased some apps from the App Store. Now you're probably wondering, what Apple ID are we using for this App Store? And the answer is none. These apps, whether they're free or paid, are purchased on behalf of my organization. And the way that that works is when you purchase an application, let's say it's something for an iPhone or an iPad that is $10. You can purchase as many licenses as you want for that app. And then you can remove that license from a particular device and move it around to different users. So this is really nice if you are purchasing a lot of applications, because right now, if you buy an app, it's going to be associated with that individual's Apple ID. Whereas now, you can provision apps that are owned by your organization to the individual that needs it, and then move it around if they no longer need it or they leave the organization. We can purchase apps right here by clicking on the custom store option, and then right here we can see once this loads, and we'll be able to buy apps for both iPhone and for Mac. Now, there's a setup process for this. You simply need to enter in some credit card information. And this was formerly called the VPP, or the Volume Purchasing Program. Now they just call it Apps and Books. Right here you can see some of the mobile apps that I've already purchased. Let's go ahead and look for the 1Password app, as I've recently moved from Dashlane to 1Pass. Sweet. Let's go ahead and grab the macOS app right here. And since this is a free application, I'm going to purchase 100 licenses. Now, when you're purchasing a larger number of licenses, it may take some time for that transaction to process. You may even need to click refresh if after 30 seconds you don't see the page update. Okay, I did indeed have to click refresh, and now I'm back in my Apps tab. You can see I have 1Password 7 for Mac. Now, if I wanted to get this for iOS, that is actually a separate app, so I would need to purchase those free licenses as well. Now, right above here, you notice this new feature we have called New Package. And this is a game changer because it allows us now with ABE to install apps on Macs that are not in the App Store. A great example is Adobe Creative Cloud. You cannot get Adobe Creative Cloud in the Mac App Store. You can get Lightroom and a few other standalone apps, but if you need the full Creative Cloud suite, the only way to get that up until now with ABE was to manually install it. Well, if you have remote workers, you have to do a lot of screen sharing to be able to get that set up. Not anymore. With custom packages, you can install anything, Spotify, or even potentially run some custom applications as well. You do need to host the data on a repository. This could be GitHub or even something that you self-host, but this is a pretty cool feature that really makes ABE a lot more useful to organizations that have a little bit more specific needs. Awesome, now that we've gotten some apps, let's go ahead and create a collection to assign these apps, as well as the settings we made earlier to a user group. Now I'm going to make a collection and just call it Organizational Defaults. Now we can go ahead and assign 1Password. And then let's pick some settings to assign to this collection. I'm going to choose all three of these. And then we're going to assign this to the people user group, which has no users currently, and I'll show you where we can add a user to that. And then we're going to click Save. Now the last step we need to do to get all of these things to roll out to my machine right now is to add me to that user group. So we're going to go to People, and we're going to add myself. Awesome. Now all of these configurations are going to be deploying to my machine, and we can actually watch this happen if we go back to the Profiles menu in Settings. And there you see, all the profiles we have are now being installed. That's it. We have successfully set up Apple Business Essentials, created our first user, enrolled our first device, and assigned settings to a collection, and then thrown that device and the user associated with that device in that collection. Before we get rolling, there's one more thing I want to show you, and that's enrolling what we would typically call a BYOD device, or a bring your own device, but what Apple likes to call personal devices. Now the idea behind this is that when your employee brings their personal iPhone or iPad, you can enroll them in ABE. You'll have a much more limited set of controls as a technical administrator, but you can still give them access to the corporate Wi-Fi and let them access the organization iCloud and shared drives and things like that. And I'm going to go ahead and enroll my personal device right here and show you what that looks like. So go ahead and open up your Settings app, and then from there we're going to scroll down and go to General. While in General, we're going to go down and then we're going to go to VPN and Device Management. From here we want to just choose Sign in with a work or school account, and then we're going to sign in with our managed Apple ID. Now that we are signed in, we're just being notified that we are going to allow my organization, in this case Unified IT, to have limited access to my device. So we're going to go ahead and choose Allow Remote Management, and then we're going to enter in the device passcode to authenticate this. Awesome, we've now enrolled in iCloud for Work, and we can see some of the perks that we get. Let's go ahead and click Continue. And we have our own little iCloud menu right here. We can see my managed Apple ID email address right there. We can unenroll from device management by signing out. We can see we have 200 gigs of iCloud storage, and we can see my MacBook Pro, which we set up earlier. Now if I back out of here and we go to the main settings menu, you can see at the very top is my personal Apple ID. This is the Apple ID that I used when I set up my iPhone initially. And then right below there is the organization that I'm enrolled in. If I tap on iCloud, I can see the iCloud services this device has access to. iCloud Drive is the coolest one. If you're already using Google Drive or something like Microsoft 365, you may want to just not use this feature as it can create a data silo. But if you love iCloud and need a few more features for managing it with your team, this is a great solution. I just want to show you how this works technically. If you go to the Files app, you can see we have two iCloud drives. The very first one is my personal iCloud drive, and the second one is the iCloud drive for my organization. Let's go ahead and make a new folder just to show you how the sync works. From my Mac, I can navigate to Finder, iCloud Drive, and there's that folder we created earlier. Now, I can also enable desktop and documents syncing, which is just like what it would be on a personal iCloud account. And I want to reiterate, iCloud for Work is in its infancy. And so if you're already using a solution such as Google Workspace or M365, you're probably going to find it lacking if you migrate to it. With that said though, it is a nice pairing for ABE, and if you're already using your iCloud personal account for business, this might be a nice way to keep your business files separate, especially if you're on a small team and have another solution for your email. But I do suspect that Apple will bring business email to iCloud in the future, as they already have custom domain support for personal iCloud accounts. But we've covered a lot in this video, and I didn't get to everything, particularly FileVault, which I would love to show you how to set up, as well as adding more users and expanding ABE. The biggest thing with learning anything new, as I imagine if you're watching this, this is probably your first time setting up an MDM. Let me encourage you, take your time. Set up your first device, play with the settings, see what they do a backup first to be safe, but try to break things. And that is the best way to get comfortable with new technology. Once you do that and you're comfortable, go ahead and roll it out to the rest of your team. And I think for the organizations that are 5 to 25 devices, where you as the business owner, or maybe a part-time IT person who has a ton of other duties, this is going to be a great solution for you. With all that said though, if you need help deploying ABE, Mosyle, or really any MDM or anything IT, we can help. We're a full-service IT company, and we'd love to come alongside you, whether that's hourly or managing an entire MDM project for you. But until then, I will catch you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Bye for now.